And we welcome you into another week of Scrushy on Business. My name is Dave Green, joined by Richard Scrushy. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I'm just excited about the fall and the leaves falling and the beautiful colors of the trees and life goes on. Thank goodness that God gave us four seasons, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't all get to experience those. Here in St. Louis, sometimes we skip seasons. We think that we have a fall, but it kind of goes, it gets a little cooler. Then we always have this big leap that happened about a week ago where we got back into the 80s and now it's going to be freezing. So sometimes it's tough. You don't get to experience all four of them in a year. But I'm with you. Yeah, I like the four season change.
I think the coldest I've ever been. I did the winter of 1979 in St. Louis, and I remember we had 54 days that it never got above minus 17. Now that's cold.
Yes.
And I don't even know. I mean, that's amazing. And of course, I didn't know anything about being in that kind of weather. And of course, my gas froze in my tank and I didn't have a car. And I didn't know about, you got to put the heat in the gas tank. And oh man, I tell you, I had to go buy the chains and it was something else.
Yeah.
I learned about rough winters. You guys really have to be tough to stay up there and continue to live in that. But I know it's absolutely beautiful.
It's
Uh,
yes, you get those, it's just you wouldn't think of it. It's certainly not like, some of the northern cold. And it's certainly not like some of the southern heat. However, you butt up right against both of those sometimes here. So, but
yeah.
anyway, we were planning this week, Richard, to
Hmm.
talk about. I keep telling you, we get our questions in at info at scrushyonbusiness.com, and we've kind of started grouping them together based on the subject. This week, there were some questions about things that are happening in the news, some things that are happening with businesses today. So, our plan was to address a few questions that had come in on those topics. And lo and behold, you are in the news today and a business story, and I want to give you the opportunity to address a story that's at al.com, the Alabama newspaper of record. You have sued a company, a law firm, in fact, and it's not for just a few nickels. Tell us about what's going on.
Well, yeah. So the headlines, I have sued this law firm, Bradley A. Rent in Birmingham, Alabama, for several $1 billion. They have done some things that they should not have done. As a matter of fact, what they've done is it's just, as my attorneys say, it's just incredible and so unbelievable that a law firm would do these kind of things. They had years and years ago, back, I guess it was in uh, the 90s and then into the early 2000s. I had a construction business, I had property business, I had an aviation company. My wife had a clothing company. She made women's pajamas and a company called Upsy Daisies. We had a bunch of different companies and several others. And we had hired, I had working for me full time CPA and full time business manager because I was running, at one time, two Fortune 500 companies, three New York Stock Exchange companies. I was very busy. We had at Health South, for example, we had facilities in all 50 states and multiple countries. I was traveling all over the world. I was doing transactions and growing that company. We had over 50,000 employees. I'm working all the time. And at the same time, I was involved in building a company called Med Partners with a friend of mine, Larry House, and then that company became Caremark, and I ended up over there as chairman of that company and chairman of Health South at the same time and chairman of Capstone Capital. So I'm running all these companies, New York Stock Exchange companies, traveling all over the world, and I had a business manager that was handling day to day stuff on my private things, and also I had a full time CPA that worked for me, and they would hire attorneys and hire different people to do various different work for me, and they had hired an attorney who eventually went over and started working, I guess, with Bradley Arand, which I didn't have any knowledge of, and My business folks handled all that business, and so for years that law firm did work, all of our private businesses and my wife's and everything else. But uh, so I go through all of this court hearings, and I go through all of this. I won everything in federal court concerning Health South and SEC, and all that went away. I won everything. On every count. I was found not guilty, and then I get the civil lawsuit. They come at me with a civil lawsuit. Well, guess what? The firm that represented all of our private companies was suing me. And so you go back into the early 2000s, and we find, and I didn't know that. I didn't have any idea they were adverse to me. And I found out this past April, I think it was on Good Friday, going through a box of information that my CPA had handled. Of course, he passed away, but there was a box of his information, and we found that this law firm had done all this work and for our private businesses. And then they turned around and took that information, sued me, my wife, and came against, and then went after to take all that business. So they were representing us, and then all of a sudden they're adverse to us at the same time. So the same time they're
Yeah.
representing us, and it's a lot more detailed than that. But
And
my
let me
attorneys,
ask.
yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
pretend, obviously, to know all of
Yeah,
the details, but I just want to stop you for a second because I want to ask you just a
yeah.
kind of a procedural question. Because every time I have reached out to an attorney, one of the first things they do is look for conflict of interest
Thank you.
as to whether or not they can take me on as a client. I'm assuming that was not something that was brought up, right? Isn't literally the mistake right there?
You're exactly right. So when in a law firm, and law firms have to do this, and this is what the law requires, you can't represent a client and be adverse to him concurrently. You can't be representing two sides, and so that's what they did. And as a matter of fact, what their internal requirements are, and the requirements under the law is they have to sit with me and say, okay, we represent you. Okay. Now we're going to represent these other people that are going to be adverse to you. And so we want you to sign this waiver. They have to literally confront me, get me to sign a waiver, and they're not supposed to secretly go do that. And they did. And so in doing that, uh, and in doing that, they broke the rules. And it's totally unprofessional. It's wrong in every way, and they did not ask for a waiver. They did not meet with me. They did not meet with my wife, and they literally came after to take all of those businesses that they had done the work on away from me and away from my wife. And so this is unbelievable what they did. And so it's being litigated, and it's in a court in Birmingham. And we've also sued them for malpractice. And, we're asking for all of the things that they did wrong to be overturned. I mean, it's really, really wrong what they did. And I mean, I can't even believe what they've done. So, I'm, thinking about, well, let me just read some of the things in the article. Let's see. It says Scrushy's malpractice lawsuit alleges that Bradley Arent lawyers in 1998 were hired to represent him and his interests, but later aligned with Health South in 2002 as the corporation fought its founder and eventually, I was taken out, left there. The conflict climaxed in March of 2003, when we went through that uh, federal raid there at Health South, where we had to go through all of that. Of course, I was found not guilty on every account of anything that they accused us of. And so it goes ahead and it says that um, let's see, okay, I made the comment they couldn't have gathered my assets that they gathered and not known that they had a conflict. It'd been impossible. And there are other lawyers involved too. And I'm sure that my attorneys will make sure that all of those things are handled appropriately. Um, but let's see. Of course, they didn't comment. But they have an affidavit from one of the attorneys there that says that the law firm did represent me and my wife and numerous companies, and they handled all of our real estate stuff. And at the same time, they were representing, another company that was adverse to me. And this is something you just cannot do. Let's see. I was going to.
I think it's an important point to bring up, and in the way we do this podcast, which is to advise you as someone who is either getting ready to start a business, or you've started a small company and are looking to make it a big one. And this is what I would tell you as a small business owner, which is advocate for yourself. um you know we have a tendency as human beings to trust certain professions more than others, right? Doctors,
Exactly.
lawyers, right? Those types of people that gone to school for a long time, they've been certified in a lot of things, and you tend to trust that they're doing what's in the best interest for you. And I'll tell you a situation where I had someone representing me who I not only had as an attorney, but I considered a friend. But my stuff, Richard, frankly, was small potatoes. And later, I kind of realized, you know what? Of course, there's a priority everywhere, right? So,
Exactly.
how much work is being done or thought process put into what you need, and then to come to find out after it had happened to me, I was sort of on the internet just kind of playing around and saying, well, what did I do wrong here, right? Where could I have done better for myself? And really, just a Google search found me enough information that I could have made a better decision than the attorney who was advising me and I was paying and was my friend gave me at that time, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
let's just face it, sometimes human beings have to make decisions. I'm going to put more time into this or more time into that. So advocate for yourself always. And
Mhm.
I would tell business owners the lesson here is just simply this. Whenever you're talking to a law firm about any work, make sure that conflict of interest
Always.
conversation has been had.
And that's I just quote my attorney there. One of my attorneys, Jonathan Austin, said the conflicts of interest were not disclosed to Scrushy, which they weren't. He called it unconscionable that any firm would represent a client and then go to work for another client and directly opposed to him, and you just can't do that. He said it didn't take a whole lot of digging to see the inconsistencies in what took place, is what my attorney said to the reporter. He said, I see that there's some issues and there's some steps that Bradley Arank could have taken, and they didn't take them. Another one of my attorneys said these cases are about basic rules of representing clients and Bradley Arank's failure to do so. So, going back to your point, it is a requirement. You can't be representing one guy, this representing us, and then represent somebody who's adverse to us, and not sit down with us and tell us that you're going to go do that. You have to do that. You have to get a waiver. You have to get approval. So basically, what we have filed a lawsuit to have them disqualified, and to have them thrown out of the case. They should not be in the case because had they had a conflict. So we've sued them for that, and we also sued them for malpractice, for what they've done. And so it's just wrong. And really, this kind of stuff should not be swept under the carpet. It has to be dealt with because, I mean, this is a big case, and it's not time barred. It's not time. It doesn't matter if how long ago it was. I mean, hey, think about this. If and we see this now, DNA, because of DNA, we see that there are people who have been let out of prison 20 years. They get accused of murder. 20 years later, they find out the DNA wasn't theirs; it was somebody else's, and they have to let them out of prison. So that means that the injustice, it was cleaned up. The wrong was made right. They were released. Well, this is a situation where it was wrong. And it doesn't matter about how much time it was. Justice is justice, and wrongs have to be made right. And when something like this is uncovered and it's just so dishonest, it goes against everything that lawyers are supposed to do. Lawyers are trained to get waivers when there's conflict, and they even in their own internal operation over there, they have policies that say they've got to run these conflict checks. And you're exactly right. It has to be done. It was not done in the case against my wife and I. And it is wrong, and it's got to be, and it needs to be overturned, and justice needs to be done. And the only way to do justice is to overturn it, throw those guys out, disqualify them. They should be sanctioned. I even think they ought to be disbarred. I mean, because when you know that you have they should have reported it to the court. We have affidavits from my existing attorney that represented me in the litigation. They knew they had a conflict, and they never disclosed it to him. They never disclosed it to the court. They didn't do any of the things that the laws require of professional conduct. And those kind of things are wrong. And it's just wrong, and it needs to be made right. And you can't just say, oh, well, it's been a long time, so, it's okay. In a murder case, the DNA proves that man didn't do that or that lady didn't do that. They let them out of prison, and they compensate them for the wrongdoing to try and make that wrong right. And in this situation with me and my wife and my children, my 9 children and my 9 grandchildren, we need to be taken care of. This needs to be overturned. The law firm needs to be disqualified, sanctioned, and probably some of the attorneys disbarred because they knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew it was wrong, and they did it anyways. And so there was a total disregard for the law. And let me tell you, it was disregard to the judge. They should have told the judge, hey, Judge, Your Honor, we got a problem here. We've represented him, and now we're adverse to him. Well, you can't, and let me tell you, there are certain things that can't be waived. You can't even waive that, is what my understanding is of the law. So, I mean, they certainly should have sat down with me and my wife. The law requires they sit down with me and my wife and say, hey, by the way, we're going to start, suing you. And I know we're representing you now, but what actually happened is that they were representing us and the other party at the same time. And what's interesting is that law firm has already been disqualified in another case for doing the same thing. And my understanding, there may be other lawsuits against them in other cases where they did that. So, it's just what it is. It's wrong. And we live in a world now where we do have laws, and they're supposed to be followed. And attorneys are officers of the court. And if anybody, like you said, Dave, if anybody ought to follow the law, it's got to be the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the laws are. I haven't gone to law school. I haven't been trained to know all of these things. I only know what my attorneys tell me. I don't go reading the law. I'm a business guy. Now, I've come across a few things in my life, but I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know how to practice law, and I don't know what they're supposed to do. But I find out now that what they were supposed to do was to come to me, and they didn't do that, and say, hey, by the way, we're fixing to sue you. I know we've been representing you, and we represented all these assets and everything and took all of this, but now we're fixing to take all that away from you, and we're going to sue you. But they didn't do any of that. And so I think we're in a situation where in this world today, if we're going to continue to, do great things in this country, I mean, I think our justice system is supposed to be blind, right? And things are supposed to be balanced. I mean, I see those scales out there. They're not supposed to be like this. Let's favor the crooked lawyers or the crooked plaintiff or whoever it is. It's supposed to be balanced. And that's what we're supposed to do. And waivers and conflicts checks, that balances things out, and makes it right. And so we're in a situation where, I'm just pray that the court will do the things that are right. I've got, I think, very good attorneys who are on it. They know the law. They're very disturbed with what they found out. And the more they dig into it, the more they find. So anyways, that's my story today. That's in the news. Some people are going to see that. I'll probably get some emails about it. So I wanted to go ahead and just put it out there, say my piece, let everybody hear it, and they know where we are. And so hopefully, things are going to go very well in the court system, and that it'll be, we'll have some good rulings based on what the law is and what we believe is right and what my attorneys believe is right. So I know we
As
have
we
some other
mentioned,
questions, huh?
you can check out the article yourself.
Yep.
al.com is where it is. And as you said, we've got some questions we wanted to get to that are other stories happening in the world of business. One of the things that we've seen, unfortunately, is the restaurant business has not been doing very well, especially from a national brand perspective. Mike from St. Paul, Minnesota, wrote into info@scrushionbusiness.com, and he says this: Richard, some major brands are collapsing because of debt. He mentions Red Lobster and some of the other longtime household names. Here's his question: what warning signs should entrepreneurs look for so they don't fall into the same trap with over leveraging?
That is such a great question. And unfortunately, I'd say I have, pretty good bit of experience with that situation because my family, my sons, had a restaurant chain and still have some involvement in that restaurant chain. But here's what happened. We went through COVID, and the federal government came out and said you can't have any dine in. Well, like I'm just going to take one of their stores, the one here in Houston. They had two actually, but the one in the Woodlands area would fill up at night, the inside of the restaurant, and I have been there when there was a line out the door. And in COVID, they made them, even the locals here, that if they went by your restaurant, you had to have all your chairs on the table. You couldn't serve anybody in the restaurant. So that broke the chain of all of the customers' practice that would come there once a week or once a month or twice a week or whatever, and they would eat there. And so all of that went away. Well, when you took out all of that, and the restaurant and the business, was cut way down. And of course, they still had delivery, but the delivery that they were doing was nowhere near the amount of inside business they were doing, right? And so um, that was a real problem. So then when COVID goes away and you can now have customers back in, you don't have the same volume of customers. And then you have another problem because of what happened in the food industry. The people that sell you your chicken or sell you your dough or sell you all your vegetables and your everything that you have to use to make the product, they went up on prices. And they also added, get this, they add transportation cost to bring it to you because during COVID, the sales went down. So they were hurt. So you think about this, it goes all the way back even to the truckers. Everybody is hurt, all the way down to the farmers, all the way down to the people that manufacture the products because the sales went down.
Yep.
Well, and here's what happened. So you had all these employees, and you didn't want to fire your good employees, but you didn't have the income to pay them. So now the business starts losing money. Well, here's the problem. When it starts to come back, I'm just going to use a couple of different examples. The cost of making, the cost of wings, chicken wings. A wing was costing over $1 a wing. Well, that means if somebody ordered 12, in order for you to make a profit, you'd have had to charge $20 for 12 wings. Well, nobody's going to pay that. So, your prices were $10.99 before COVID, and now you end up and you can't charge what you got to charge to make a profit. Now, and the same thing on a pizza. So, there were some pizza operations, and I noticed in New York, they were out there charging, $10 for one piece of pizza, and pizza costs went up $30 and $40 for a large pizza. But in the market that my son's business was in, they were at like $14.99 was the most they could charge, and if they got higher than that on a pizza, then they would lose business, and so the customers were complaining. So when they tried to raise the rate, the sales price on their wings, their customers quit buying.
Right.
So they lost customers. So here's what happened: the cost of goods, okay, was so high, and then they added this transportation cost, and the provider they were using with that brought the weekly, the national company that brings the food to you. They added a transportation cost. So they're looking at it now. They don't even have a margin. They're not making any money. So they're working and they're selling the pizzas and they're selling the products for exactly what it costs them to buy it and make it. So they didn't have a margin anymore. So they're not making a profit. And so when you start looking at these companies that have brick and mortar, now, unfortunately, they didn't have brick and mortar; they were just paying lease payments. But these brick and mortar companies that have debt and have had to, build these nice buildings, and they've got the overhead associated with all that, they went in the red. And so they weren't making the money because they couldn't charge enough to be able, because nobody was going to eat there. I mean,
Right.
I'm looking. There's a hamburger chain that I went in not long ago, and I paid $16 for a drink and a hamburger, and I thought, my goodness, and you're seeing that now. So
Oh yeah.
it used to be that a family of four could go to a pizza restaurant, and for $30 they could have a pizza and everybody get a drink. You could get a large pizza, everybody gets a drink, and you could possibly even get some wings, and you walk out of there with $35. And that would feed a whole family of four. Well, now, if you could, the restaurant would lose money at $35.
Right.
They can't do it. So what's happened is the cost of goods went up. And then on top of that, electricity went up, insurance went up, and then the cost of wages went up. Now think about it. And the only thing that didn't really go up was their ability to charge the customer more for the product they were selling them. So where they had a 25% margin, it collapsed. And actually, in some cases, it went negative. And that's what we saw in the restaurant business. And we've seen that. And so many companies went out. So if you're, getting back to your question here, if you're thinking about getting into the restaurant business, look very, very hard at your cost of goods. Look really hard at what you can charge your customer and what your competitors are out there charging your customers. Because I'm telling you right now that a lot of restaurants are struggling. And they're struggling with the margin because the margin has been squeezed so much. And the cost of goods have gone up. The cost of delivering goods have gone up. The insurance has gone up. The cost of employees has gone up. The rent has gone up. The power bill has gone up. Everything's gone up. And if you take a look at all that, if you really were able to make the same 25% margin, you're talking about two people walking into a pizza place trying to get dinner, and it would cost $75, $80.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then some people add 15 to DoorDash it, and now it's
Yeah.
$100 for two people to
Well,
eat. It's
now let's talk about that because here's the other thing too. They're charging the restaurant. I mean, some Grubhub. I mean, so here was the other thing. They're charging the restaurant 30%. So they make the profit. The restaurant made, they got a $30 tab, but and then Grubhub's taking, $8 and $10 of it. Are you aware of that? I mean, they get a slice of it.
yeah.
And so what happens is, and then there's a company called Slice, and they get a piece of it. And then you've got DoorDash, you've got all these others. So it really, and let me tell you the problem that they had was these folks would show up with Grubhub or DoorDash. They didn't even have a hot box. And so they would ask them, how far you got to deliver this pizza? And well, it was 12, 15 miles. So, well, you're in here with a hot box. By the time you get there with my pizza, it's going to be cold. So then the customer gets a cold pizza. They would call and say, look, my pizza was cold. Well, yeah, well, the guy drove around for an hour before he ever delivered it to you. But
Right.
it
Not our
wasn't.
fault. Yeah.
Anyways, a lot of things that the guy building a restaurant needs to think about, or the lady building a restaurant, and really study before you jump off and get into that business. I can tell you that right now.
There is no doubt about that. Let's. You brought up COVID, and Sophia from Cincinnati, Ohio, wrote in and said, "Richard, we're seeing a huge wave of companies pushing employees back into the office after years of hybrid work. From a CEO perspective, what's the right strategy? Does forcing people back actually help productivity, or does it hurt long-term culture? This is an issue a lot of businesses are dealing with after having people be out of the office, moving to hybrid, and now a lot of people wanting everybody back in the office after those employees experienced life in that hybrid world or working from home. What are your thoughts?"
Well, I think there's some unique individuals that can work from home and be extremely productive, but I don't think it's the majority of the people. I think there are people like you or I. You put me in, I don't care. I can work anywhere, and I might be in an airport somewhere, but I can promise you I'm working. And if I have a job, I'm going to do my job. But there are a lot of people that aren't like that, Dave. And I think it's the majority of the people are not like that. And so what I found is that, when you're building a business, you got all kinds of different people. You got some people that if you don't push them, they don't perform. Some people are going to go in there and they're going to work really hard no matter what because they want to be better and they want to grow and they want to be successful and they want to get promoted and they want to make more money. But there's some people that just don't want to do that. And they just want to 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 and they're going to come in and they're going to do as little as they can and I used to and believe me, I had 1,000 people in my corporate office, and so I had people like that. I had people. If you didn't tell them they had to be there at 9 o'clock, they'd come in at 10, or you didn't tell them they got to be there at 8. And let me tell you, at 5 o'clock, you'd get run over if
Right.
people trying to get out the door. So if you those kind of people may not be the best people to be working at home. They won't be as productive. So I'm a guy that I like to see my team. I like to talk to my team. I like to chat with them. I like to come in and say, hey, we need to do this, 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 and this, and I need you to make it happen today. And when they're spread out all over the country and you don't see them, they don't get the fire from the CEO. They don't get the vision. They don't get the fire from their chief operating officer or whoever they work for. And I just think if you're built, especially if you're building a new business, you really ought to be working as a team. Let me tell you, there's nothing better than people sitting in a room working on a project, throwing ideas back and forth. And you may be on a Zoom and you might have 20 people on a Zoom. It's not the same because they can not show their video. They might not say anything. They're not intimately involved. But if you put them in a room where you can look them in the eyes and you can talk to them and you can say, what do you think? And what do you think? And can you help? Would you mind doing this part? Would you mind doing that? I'm telling you, you're going to be much more productive. So I'm believing that any successful company is going to be built based on the ability for the building a team, communicating, look, if you can get everybody being fully productive every day, well, you're going to move the wagon up the hill. It's going to be much better. But if you've got people out there and you're paying them a lot of money and you're not 100% sure whether they even own the job. But see, the thing about being in an office, you can walk around that office and see who's there. And if you have things that need to be done, you can just drop in and say, Miss Susie, would you handle this? Billy, would you do that? And could you come to my office because we got some things to do and I want to see if you could handle this for me and go there and do. But when they're out there, you don't have that. You're not seeing them. You're not thinking about them.
Right.
You don't have that team effort. You don't have everybody out front pulling the wagon and making it happen. I've got this wagon up here behind me, this little red wagon, and I think about it all the time. It's a simple concept, but if people are out there and they're riding in the wagon, and let's say they're out there and you're only getting 2 or 3 hours a day worth of work out of them. Could you imagine if you had 50 people working for you and you were getting, 80 and 90% productivity out of them every day, how much further that wagon is going to move every day and how things are going to get done? And, you see companies that are struggling right now with their margin, struggling with cash flow, and you don't know what all the people are doing. It's tough. So I highly recommend that, especially if you're building a company, get everybody together and work together as a team and move that wagon as a team.
We're going to finish with this one, and I am appreciative of Jason from right near me in Kansas City, Missouri. He wrote in, lots of companies are struggling with young employees job hopping quickly. How should businesses, or what can businesses realistically do, Richard, to build loyalty with Gen Z and keep them longer than a year? Grass is always greener on the other side, and it seems to be more quickly so, if you will, with Gen Z.
It's just right back to what we were just talking about, communication. If you're working at a company and you don't think and you're a highly motivated individual like you and like I am, and you don't see that you can advance and you don't see that there's future opportunity to make more money, to get a better position, then you're going to change jobs. You're going to do it. And I don't blame people that's sitting there. If you're sitting there and you think, man, I want to do more and they won't let me, and I'm working under somebody who's just dull as can be and won't doesn't appreciate the hard work and whatnot, yeah, your chances are that if some people are okay with that now. They like that because if you out of sight, out of mind, nobody bothers me. I do my little bit of work every day, and I can do this for my life and retire in 40 years. But there are people that say no. I want to make more money. I want to be successful. I want to be part of this organization. And if you don't include them and you don't communicate with them and you don't let them give you their ideas and whatnot, look, let me tell you, if you're going to try to find the best way to get the trash out of the building, ask the guy who takes it out. And if you're building a company and you've got people in that company and they have specific jobs and you want to know the best way to get this done or that done, you need to talk to them and ask them because let me tell you, as a CEO of a company, I didn't have all the answers, but I had good people with me that had the answers. And I was smart enough to say, what do you think? How do you think we ought to handle this? How do you ought to do it? And if you don't have your team involved, they're going to leave you. They will. Not everybody, but the highly motivated individuals that were looking for bigger and better opportunities, promotions, make more money, they will. And so if you can get those people productive, you're going to build a very successful, large, profitable company if you take the best of the best and you make sure you communicate with them. There's nothing worse, Dave, than having a really smart, aggressive person who wants to move up and you won't listen to them and you won't talk to them and you won't let them say their piece. The greatest thing you can do to keep those employees is communicate and ask them questions. What do you think? Tell me how would you do this? And then take that into consideration. They're not always right, but a lot of times they are right. And so I believe in communication. I think that's the bottom line. And I think if you want to keep your good employees around, you need to work with them. You need to give them opportunity. You got to communicate with them. So those are simple things. And I really believe in that. And I don't care how small your business is or how big your business is. You need to be able to do that. And as a CEO, you can't always get to everybody, but you can build a culture inside of your company so that the people under you do the same thing you do. And you train them and you teach them and you say, talk to your people, ask them, communicate, motivate, do those things. And then there needs to be a clear career path, a financial career path and a career path for mobility, upward mobility. And if that's not clear, then you're going to lose some folks.
It's great information like that you get right here every week on Scrushy on Business. Reminder, you can email I'm sorry, info at scrushyonbusiness.com. That's how you can get to Richard Scrushy and ask him questions, whether it be about business in general or about your business in particular. So we thank those that wrote in this week, and we look forward to another great week next week. And Richard, I'll give you the final word before we leave for this week.
Well, I appreciate that. We did talk early on about the fact that I have filed a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against a law firm in Birmingham, Alabama, that has done some things that were wrong. They violated the laws. They didn't follow the proper laws, and so you may want to tell your friends, check out this podcast. Richard talks about it, and he makes it real. And you get my response. You can read the article on AL.com, but you also can actually listen to what I have to say about it. So put that out there. Appreciate you guys watching. Follow that dream. There are a lot of opportunities out there right now. Be careful. Make sure you put your plan together. Work your plan. Surround yourself with good people. And God bless you. We hope the best for all of you.
We will see you next week right here on Scrushy on Business. Thank you.